When you switch to AIT Worldwide Logistics for automotive shipping, you're partnering with a team of logistics professionals in Asia, Europe, and North America who develop customized supply chain solutions that are just as unique as your business. Whether it's trans-border hotshot trucking, express ocean service, or an exclusive air charter, AIT has the expertise, technology, and carrier connections to achieve your production goals every time. Check out their link in the show notes. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2, second gear as we say, of the transmissions show coming to you from FreightWaves TV. My name's Sebastian Blanco. I'm here with Grace Sharkey. Grace, how are you doing today?
I am doing good. Today's actually my birthday, so having an even better day
Happy
than normal.
birthday. You wanted to spend it talking about the automotive supply chain, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a party all the kids are doing this year. The costumes are out of hand. The birthday cake decorators, they've got to put little trucks on all kinds of cakes this year. It's definitely a trend.
Exactly. You read my mind.
So, yeah, today we have a couple of topics we wanted to get into. One is a meeting that is that the White House is really showing with the scheduling and with the meeting itself that they are taking one of the big issues that's happening to the supply chain industry very serious, because it affects not just the supply chain industry. It's affecting everyone. And that is a meeting, it's going to be virtual, but with administration officials, economic advisors, and CEOs of companies, including Intel, which we'll get into in a second. But it's about the chip shortage, which I'm sure many people have heard about by now, because again, it's reaching beyond sort of insular borders of trade media, basically, because it's affecting everything from cars on dealer lots. It's affecting computers, video game machines, because of the way that the chip makers around the world shifted focus last year with COVID, and now there's not enough of these chips that are available for things like automobiles, whether they're electric or not. Chips go in. There's hundreds of chips that go into all kinds of vehicles. But what have you heard about this meeting? And what can you say about what you hear when you hear the invite list of people who are going to be attending? What does that signal to you?
For me, it's showing how serious they're taking this issue. It's funny that you mentioned kind of the timeline of when this all started. I first heard about the chip shortage really from a lot of companies that make like the PlayStations, etc. Back when the newest PlayStation came out, and now it's finally hitting trucks, and it's also now hitting truck manufacturers. And I think what's really great is seeing that he's bringing on people like Intel, who just recently invested $20 billion in factories in Arizona to bring the supply chain here to the domestic, U.S. I'm very interested in how a lot of that type of reshoring might happen here, or at least nearshoring, getting it to Mexico, because with the way that the ports are and the way that the economy is bouncing back, I don't see very many supply chains overseas getting any faster anytime soon. And if we're going to start shifting into second gear, right, today, if we're going to start shifting into second gear on sustainability issues, and especially EV engines, then we need to start getting this stuff here in the United States. So I'm excited to see what they actually come out with, what their plan ends up being, but really inviting a company who just recently invested so much into bringing that type of technology here back home is great to see. And I know that there's issues clearly with trade within China, and I think that China is really starting to push more of that technology enterprise and becoming known more as technology gods compared to, hey, this is where you go to get things done cheaper. So I think it's smart that we start investing in bringing this type of supply chain back home before we get to a point where we have to rely on someone who we keep having kind of trade disagreements with. So I'm excited. I thought it was a great move. I was very happy to read through and see that Intel was involved, and I can't wait to see what they end up coming up with.
Yeah, and it's right now the White House spokesperson Jen Psaki is basically saying like, don't look for any massive announcements coming out of this deal. It's more of we've got to start this discussion. We got to figure out what's possible. There was a call in or a part of the Biden administration's American Jobs Plan, the big infrastructure bill, that also set aside or decided or wanted to spend about $50 billion for the chip industry, domestic chip industry in general. That's on top of the 20 billion you're talking about, which is a specific Intel investment. But talking about we're going to allocate this money now doesn't mean we're going to get chips anytime soon. I mean, anybody who knows how auto manufacturing goes, it takes years to sort of get plants up and running and then start producing the parts and getting them to the other plants that need them. So this is not going to affect things in the near term, but it is good to see that they're starting to look at the problem, and you can't ignore it right now in the automotive world. Certain cars have tremendous markups if they're even available because this chip shortage has shut down production globally. And here in the U.S., I know that Ford is, they're still building cars. They still have the steel and the other components that they need, but they're just building them without some of the parts that need these chips. And they're like, well, we'll have these sitting on a lot somewhere, and then when these chips arrive, we will run the vehicles through the plants again, this time installing the components that have the missing chips. So that's only a temporary solution. You can't have an endless pile of F-150 sitting in a lot somewhere just waiting for another component. But it is a way to keep people employed, people occupied, and plants running for now. And we will definitely we'll be seeing what they announce next week, or I guess this week by the time this comes out, about what the U.S. might be doing, like you said, to reshore some of this work, because the global supply chain works until it doesn't, right? that's really been the lesson of COVID for a lot of people here is.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting is I think Alan wrote an article about it. It takes like 17 of these chips per vehicle, which I thought was pretty high. And so if we can, clearly we can't have all of these trucks sitting somewhere with each of them needing this many chips, and we're just all sitting around waiting for the boat to come in. Like it's not going to work. And a lot of people are saying like, can we switch it? Start getting them over here in airplanes. Like that's not cost effective either. They're already going to be more expensive vehicles. We can't just be adding extra costs due to shipping because of our lack of domestic infrastructure. So I think it's good all around, and it's just good to have the conversation at the end of the day.
And speaking of things that are coming down the pike, things that are something that we need to think that we need to plan ahead for. Daimler announced this week that their Daimler Trucks North America, I should say very specifically, announced this week that they have opening orders for 2 of their all-electric trucks. That is the Freightliner e-Cascadia and the Freightliner EM2. These are, big-looking, semi-tractor trailers, but they're not intended for long-haul rides. They have ranges of about 230 to 250 miles when they're fully charged. That was 230 for the EM2 and 250 for the e-Cascadia, which is a Class 8 truck. But they're used for regional deliveries. They're used for right now. They're being tested at some of the ports or near the ports in California, just to give these companies a chance to test them out. And one thing that I've discovered, I've been lucky enough to drive both large electric vehicles and a regular semi from Volvo a couple years ago down at their center in North Carolina. Where is it? I forget now. But the modern, a modern semi is not as difficult to drive as they used to be, back when everybody was on the CB radio and had to shift gears all the time. But the difference between driving an electric truck of this size and even the most advanced gasoline engine truck of this size is pretty astonishing, because you don't have to worry about shifting. You don't have to worry about, stalling out or any sort of weird vibration or sound going on. And that's one of the things that Daimler is testing with these vehicles, and listening not only to the engineers about, okay, this particular battery is performing in this way under these weather conditions or after this much driving, whatever sort of the technical details that they need, but also talking to the drivers themselves about how is this working for you? Is this something that makes sense? Does the charging make sense? Does the you know, the way that we've put the batteries into the truck chassis makes sense for everything. Um, yeah, so just wondered what have you heard about truckers who've driven electric vehicles, if anything, and what sort of experience has been so far?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I think a lot of times there's like this rhetoric that drivers are afraid of this type of technology because they might look at it like, okay, well, first you make them electric, then you make them robots, then what is my job? That's it's not going to happen. We will need drivers in these trucks for quite some time. So, a lot of driver surveys are actually showing that the drivers that have rode these vehicles, it actually makes their lifestyle a lot easier. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys just want to drive. That's what they love doing. They love driving across the United States or throughout their different towns, and that's what really makes their experience. Hence the name driver. So, a lot of them actually enjoy these type of trucks because it makes the whole workflow, if you want to call it that, simple and easy. Especially, we're really working on trying to get more women in the trucking industry, and a lot of women, are even having issues back in the day with like power steering and being strong enough to be able to maneuver a vehicle. So if we can make this easier to drive, we're now opening up these type of jobs to women that might not think that they are built, for this type of work environment. So I think it's good all around. I think truck drivers like it. I think there's this like weird rhetoric out there that maybe they don't. I think they're on board for this stuff more than we think. It's just about, seeing how their company is starting to implement it. And it's great that they're focusing on more of these like medium duty vehicles because that's where I've seen a lot of trucking companies kind of focusing on implementing their strategies is okay, we're going to start with our short mile stuff and move on from there, which a lot of times trucking companies only do short haul or over the road long haul miles. So it's interesting to me to see companies like Dart, for example, was on our last summit, and they were saying that they were hoping to start implementing these in some of their shorter runs. So it's interesting how we're going to see these start implementing into the strategies of enterprise fleets, and if they can start attacking some of these different areas of transportation that's not just long haul from one side of the U.S. to the other, but maybe a couple hundred miles within their own state, which opens up also a whole nother group of drivers because you can't go interstate between states until you're a certain age. So now we can also start employing some of these younger guys into the driver market and help hopefully with some of these capacity issues we're dealing with.
Yeah, that all makes total sense to me. Coming from the passenger car side of things, like once you have experienced an electric vehicle, you realize just how well they work. Yes, of course, they're different. They have some challenges that traditional vehicles do, but they have some benefits that traditional vehicles don't have. And that's true with cars, that's true with trucks, that's true with big rigs, all the way across the board, with differences in each category, of course, because they all serve different purposes. But I still remember the first time I got to drive the Nissan Leaf or the first Tesla Roadster back in, like 2007, 2009, or 8, 9, whenever that was back then. And the feeling of how you really are in a different, very futuristic vehicle. Nowadays, there's so many EVs out there in the passenger car market that I'm glad more people can experience that, but it's becoming less and less of a thing. But for these big trucks, like, it's still going to be a cool experience for a lot of people to have that first time where they're like, I'm used to these things. I'm used to the noise. I'm used to the vibration. I'm used to these sort of challenges. And now, if you have a full pack and your fleet manager has figured out a way to, to keep things charged up, because that is going to be a logistical hassle that, people with passenger vehicles can handle with home charging or at work charging or something. Trucks need to be charged at night in some sort of fleet, or we're going to have to develop new sort of charging stations, something like that. There will be solutions. but the drivers themselves will get this experience and they'll realize that, okay, it's a different experience, but it is definitely not scary. And it'll be, I think, an eye-opening moment for a lot of people, especially it depends on how Daimler does it with these trucks. Like it seems like, from based on my experience driving Volvo's electrified options, the it'll feel very straightforward. The Volvo people did a lot of work to make the trucks work like the drivers would expect them to work. They just happen to have an electric powertrain. And I remember having a Chevy Volt many years ago for a test drive, and I went with my brother to a baseball game, and the stadium's about a half hour away from my house. So the Volt at that was the first gen model. They had an electric only range of about 40 miles. I forget if it was 37 or 42. I think it changed over the course of the vehicle. But the idea was that we were basically going to drive there about half an hour, about 30 some miles, and that would probably work with the battery pack. And then on the way back, because this was a plug-in hybrid, it would run on the gas engine. And I remember as we pulled into the baseball stadium, I said, "Oh, we just ran out of range. We just ran out of the battery pack." And I noticed it because it was quiet and it had been smooth acceleration, but I was the one driving. He was just sitting in a car and he didn't realize we were even in an electric vehicle. So for him, it was kind of an eye-opening moment, like, oh, this looks like normal, this acts like normal. We just didn't burn any fuel to make that drive. And I can see the same thing happening in trucking too, although when you're in the driver's seat, you notice it a lot more than in the passenger seat. But, look forward to those reaction videos on YouTube whenever they come out.
That's funny. I have drove like an electric vehicle, passenger vehicle, and I remember like just starting it up. Like there's a few times I like got out and kind of like left it on because I didn't even realize it was still running. It's so quiet, and I yeah, it's like a totally different user experience. I'm interested in how the drivers take to it as they start getting in there. But I think there's like a some type of stat out there that says someone who switches from a gas passenger car to electric has never gone back. They never are like, God, I really wish I had that noise again and that gas bill every time I need to go somewhere. So I just highly doubt that a driver is going to get in one of these things and be like, nope, I'm out of here. I can't do this industry anymore. That's not going to happen.
Right. The numbers I've seen are, like 95, 97% of EV buyers just stick with it. And I think with the trucks, like the drivers themselves are not always the ones making that decision, but they're going to tell their, purchase manager, whoever's in charge of actually supplying these vehicles, that no, this is great. Let's keep them coming. Then the question is about the cost and can it handle the duties that the industry is requiring of them. But these medium short distance deliveries, especially in cities, with mid-sized delivery vehicles, like it's almost a no-brainer. In places like Europe, obviously force it upon a lot of the delivery companies. They're not allowing gas engine vehicles in their city centers sometimes, things like that. Before we wrap up today, I did want to point out one thing that you mentioned about how these trucks are maybe not the best solution for long haul trucking, and I've listened to some of the engineers from Hyundai. They've talked about their hydrogen truck ideas and how over a certain weight, I don't remember the details right now, whether it's over a certain weight or over a certain range that you want to deliver trucks, it just makes sense to go hydrogen instead of electric. So we'll leave that hanging for now. But I just wanted to point out that even if these trucks can't do everything for everyone, like if they're not going to instantly switch all the trucks on the highway, it's a pretty easy thought experiment to do to see how much they can save. And I remember years ago, I was working with another writer, and he came up with a post that we did on Autoblog about, this was back when there weren't as many EVs, and Toyota was still really excited about eking out a few more miles per gallon for the Prius. You go from 45 to 49 miles per gallon on the EPA sticker or something. And that can be an impressive number, especially when they got over 50. Like, oh my goodness, like this is a thing you can really advertise. But the experiment that he wrote about on the site was, which is better? Is it better to increase the Prius from 45 to 50, or is it better to increase an F-150 from 10 to 15? And people can probably guess where this is going, but it really, really, really impacts large trucks, because every time you increase the fuel economy of a low fuel economy vehicle, it's so much more important than if you do it to an already efficient vehicle. So that Prius went from to go 100 miles burning just over 2 gallons to burning 2 gallons, right? 45 to 50, that's the math on that one. Whereas if you take a big truck that gets 10 and you increase it to 15, now instead of using 10 gallons of fuel, you're doing, what is it? No, I can't do the math on top of my head, but it's a much bigger difference than like 0.2 of a gallon, which is what you increase with the Prius. So even as we look at these changes, even as we are going to over time really get into this subject on this show, this is something to keep in mind, that we're looking at a future where even if we don't solve all the problems right away, I say as if I'm doing anything here, even if the engineers and the companies and the government are not solving all of the problems right away, they're still making a big impact on the problems that we're facing, which we're go from everything from climate change to where we get the fuel to, just how we deliver products to people in a better way. And, I'm a fan of EVs from way back. So looking at it on the truck side, man, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love it. It's going to be fun. And the government always catches on last, so that's what I think we need to take this meeting as, is like, okay, this must really be a movement if now we're really starting to set these meetings. So I'm excited. I know that we've got start charging stations in that plan and things much more, more of infrastructure for this type of electric vehicle. So let's get it going.
Yeah, it's a long project. The automotive industry, the trucking industry, nothing happens fast. But it's always
Yeah.
fun to see where change is actually happening. And to that end, we're going to throw this out to our listeners, to our viewers. We want to talk to you as well. So people who have input into this, people in the industry who want to come share their information with us. Find us on FreightWaves.com. Find me over there, and let's talk. We're looking for guests for upcoming episodes, so we're sure interested in hearing your point of view as well. This is not just Grace and I's half-hour chit-chat show. As much fun as that is, we like to hear from the industry as well. So we're gonna be adding guests in the near term. I've got a couple lined up already, but we're looking for more. So tune in, be in the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Transmissions TV, Transmissions Podcast, whatever the show is called. This was Second Gear. We had a good time. I hope you did too. We will talk to you again next week.